Нека да посрещнем с аплодисменти първият ни лектор Робин Андрюс.
Obviously, that song had to be the intro to a talk called How to Kill an Asteroid. If anyone hasn't seen it, there's some younger kids in the audience. There's a movie called Armageddon, which is a really scientifically accurate movie about saving the world from killer asteroids. It's great. It's amazing. I mean, it is kind of amazing, because when you think of saving the world from killer asteroids, that's the image that most people think of. It's Bruce Willis and co. slowly walking, because it has to be in slow motion to be cool, slowly walking towards the camera, preparing to save the world. Now, there's two stories I want to tell you about Armageddon very quickly. One is, because I'm a massive nerd, I listened to the director's commentary of Armageddon. And the director's Michael Bay, who is not he's not a thinky person. I think that's the way I'd put it. And Ben Affleck, who's in the movie, was like, at one point, he was like, so I asked Michael Bay, why would they train oil drillers to go up and put a nuke in an asteroid and not just send astronauts up to do it? And Michael Bay turned to Ben Affleck and said, shut the fuck up. That's actually what he said. So that's it. That was it. The second thing is, in the movie, the threat of the asteroid is hilariously massive. It's the size of Texas, Mr. President. Like, all the states they could have picked. It's the size of Texas. That's too big. Astronomers would have known that's coming. It's just so big. Like, the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was like 100 times smaller. And they only have 18 days to save the world from an asteroid the size of Texas. Actually, the asteroids we should be worried about are far smaller, way, way, way smaller. And to demonstrate, I'm going to destroy Sophia with one. Now, I'm sorry, I've got nothing against Sophia. It's a lovely place, but its time has come. Hope you've all brought your hard hats. So this is Sophia from space, which is how a killer rock would see it, by the way. And I'm going to throw this asteroid at it. Now, you can ignore most of those numbers, but the really important one is it's 140 meters long. That's quite tiny. That's like, a sort of American football field kind of size. For space, quite small, very, very small. It's a petite asteroid. But I'm going to throw it at Sophia at 17 kilometers a second, which is pretty normal. Now, the first thing that would happen is the middle of Sophia would have a great big hole in it. That's not good. No one wants that. That's pretty bad. That would be bad enough. I mean, I think, about 1,657 people would be vaporized immediately. Not great. But if you're thinking, I'd survive if I'm, on the outskirts, I'm taking a hike in the mountains. Nope, you absolutely wouldn't, because the impact energy of this would be larger than any nuclear bomb ever made. It would be unbelievably explosive. And that's because it's traveling so fast, and it's so massive compared to, a person, that it would just unleash so much energy. And not just when it hits the ground, it would blow up in the air as well, and that shockwave is that big. So that's not great. If you're anywhere in that area, death immediately. It's not great. It's a bad day. If you're 7.6 kilometers away, your lungs would explode. I can tell you from experience that doesn't feel great. If you're 9.9 kilometers away, your eardrums will explode. Again, not great. If you're 23 kilometers away, your homes would collapse. Again, not great. This is impressive for a tiny, tiny asteroid. And the wind strength alone would be terrifying. This is how many, 262,000 people would die from just the blast of the explosion. So the crater is the least of your problems. Maybe you don't like the center of Sophia, and you're like, I could have done without it. But if you're anywhere else, it's like being hit with winds faster than you'd ever see on Jupiter. And this is 140 meters across. This is a tiny, tiny asteroid. And just to add insult to injury, there would be a magnitude 5.1 earthquake, and that would add another 100 deaths to the total, because asteroids are dicks. Now, that's basically what would be left. It's not great. This is Meteor Crater, though, a very appropriately named crater. It's in Arizona. It's the second most famous giant hole in the ground, as opposed to the Grand Canyon. But this one's more impressive. So it's hard to tell from because there's no real sense of scale, but you could fit like St. Paul's Cathedral comfortably in that, and you'd be higher than it standing on the rim. Around the edge there, where there's like a line kind of going around it, that's where rock became fluid. And generally, rock should not do that. Rock should not become a fluid. This was caused by a 40-meter-sized asteroid made of iron that hit the ground 50,000 years ago. And when people first came across this, they reported it back to the superiors, and they were like, there's a giant hole in the ground, there's nothing there. And they were like, yeah, man, whatever, we don't believe you, this isn't real. And eventually people explored this and thought, okay, it must have been a volcanic explosion. Like, what else would create an explosion so big? But in the 50s and 60s, people started blowing up nuclear weapons quite a lot and looked at that and thought, that looks similar. What could be powerful enough to make a giant hole in the ground? And they thought, well, if you fling something into something fast enough, maybe then you could actually create a big pit. It's a bit like a nuclear weapon crater. And in fact, there are minerals in that crater that are only made in nuclear weapon explosions or if something hits it really fast. So they thought, maybe things from space hit the Earth. Maybe, but no one really took it that seriously until someone in the US Air Force, who is a giant nerd, who loves Star Trek, thought, I'm going to write a paper in the 90s that is going to suggest that the Air Force do something about asteroids. Now, in this report, which was recently declassified, there's stuff in there about China, about Russia, about what they can do with controlling the weather and space satellites. And it was like a crazy document of how can we possibly, protect America in 2020. And this was written in the early 90s. And this guy wrote a paper called Preparing for Planetary Defense. And everyone laughed at him. Why would we deal with asteroids? This is just sci-fi nonsense. Why would we need to deal with that? Until in 1994, a comet was caught around Jupiter, breaking up and falling into Jupiter. And now every one of these icy shards hitting Jupiter will unleash the force of 1,000 atomic weapons. And this happened over and over again to the point it was 300 million atomic weapons worth of energy. Now, Jupiter barely noticed that anything hit it. Barely. But everyone on Earth thought, crap, that doesn't look good. We don't want that to happen to us. What are we going to do about that? So, let's make a movie. So in 1998, Armageddon and Deep Impact came out, kind of inspired by this 1994 cometary run-in with Jupiter. And amazingly, the US Congress, Republicans and Democrats thought, that's not really going to happen, is it? And scientists were like, yeah, if you wait long enough, that will happen. So Congress actually passed a law saying that NASA are legally required to find all of what they call the planet killer asteroids, anything bigger than a kilometer. You are legally mandated to find this, NASA. It's one of the only times that NASA has been told by law they must do this. So they did, and they used their telescopes, they looked into the sky, and they found all of the quite massive asteroids, sort of dinosaur-ending, asteroids. And because they're really big, they're really, really easy to see. They just reflect more sunlight, easy peasy. But that's not the ones that scientists are particularly worried about. They've found most of the big ones in narrow space, almost all of them, really. And in 1908, it wasn't really appreciated at the time, but if you were in a remote part of Siberia in Russia, the sky would have suddenly erupted in some sort of preternatural fury. People who were wandering through that forest saw 80 million trees just flattened in an instant. Someone 25 miles away was blown backwards through their house, and people were flung into the trees. Now, in 1908, there wasn't really a reasonable explanation for this. This was before we had World War I. Like, the idea of a massive explosion caused by people seemed impossible. And that picture on the right there is actually where I live in London. It's a place called Greenwich, and that's not near Russia, but the sky lit up as if there was like 3 full moons that night. It actually lit up, and astronomers noticed this and went, what the hell was that? And it was an explosion all the way on the other side of the world. And that asteroid was tiny. Again, it was about 40, 50 meters. It kind of came out of nowhere. It didn't even hit the ground. It exploded in the sky with the force of a 12 megaton nuclear weapon. Not good. And over the years, people thought, nope, that's not good. We don't want that to happen again. But even as that research came about, people weren't really bothered about asteroids still. They found the big ones, okay, problem solved. But then in February 2013, one of the most incredible things ever happened, and the lucky miss, is a town called Chelyabinsk in Russia. Again, Russia. It's not that asteroids hate Russia, it's just Russia is big. Probably. And this asteroid was 18 meters, okay? This is tiny, tiny stuff. And it came out of nowhere. It came from the direction of the sun, so no one could see it. And it streaked across the sky. And people thought it was a missile. They actually thought they were under missile attack. And there's dash cam footage of windows exploding inwards. Again, people were blown off their feet. 1,600 people had injuries, mainly through glass being blasted into them. Someone got sunburnt because of the brightness of the asteroid. And at that point, NASA thought, fine, okay, solved. We will do something about this. I'm so sorry. So NASA announced that they were going to form the Planetary Defense Coordination Office, which is literally an office designed to save the world. The people who work there are called planetary defenders. Amazing, amazing. Now, they basically have the task of dealing with asteroids and comets, but we're not going to talk about comets like this one for now. Comets are a threat, but not particularly compared to asteroids. They're really far away for most of the time. They exist in the outer solar system. They're just chilling. Occasionally, they kind of come into the solar system, but they show up brightly. They kind of make a show of it. And to be honest, if a comet was heading for Earth, there isn't really much we could do about it, but don't tell anyone that bit. Comets we'll deal with later. Asteroids exist in the asteroid belt, and there are millions of them. And mostly, asteroids are not arseholes. They just hang out there. They don't want to injure anyone. They're just chilling, building blocks of the solar system, etc., etc. But occasionally they are, because occasionally Jupiter pulls one out of orbit, or one smashes into another, and it goes flying, and they can find their way to Earth. Now, the really big asteroids basically found them. They're just so big, they're easy to see. The really, really small ones, almost impossible to see, and there's hundreds of millions of them, but they will mostly burn up in the atmosphere. There's one in the middle there, 140 meters. We don't know where 60% of them are in near-Earth orbit. That's a lot. If you don't know where they are, you don't know where they're coming. But there is an estimate that, if you live to 100 years old, there's a 1 in 200 chance that one will hit the Earth in your lifetime. Now that's low, it's not a day-to-day worry, but that's way higher than I thought. I thought scientists were going to tell me, it's like many generations down the line, and they're just like, no, if you flip a coin enough times, you'll get one. I'm like, oh, okay. And what are these asteroids called, these mid-sized asteroids? They're like city killers. That's what we call them. Like, okay, and that's because, and they would wipe out a city immediately. I'm like, okay, we should probably go find them. We should go find them, and we should do something about them. So, this sounds like an impossible problem in a way. It's space coming to get us, but it's the only natural disaster you can entirely prevent. If you find all these asteroids and you find a way to stop them, you can delete an entire category of disaster. You cannot stop a volcano from erupting. You can't stop an earthquake from happening. But you can actually stop asteroids hitting the planet, which I think is amazing. So I don't know who put up this billboard. I saw it in New York. I mean, I know that's kind of the mood right now, but I remember seeing that and thinking, no, it's pretty cool that NASA is like, no, we're not going to let this happen. So they're going to practice saving the world. And they thought the best way to do that was to actually deflect an asteroid. And I actually have some footage of the meeting where they announced this.
Not today. Today we face the monsters that are at our door and bring the fight to them. Today we are canceling the apocalypse.
Okay, that wasn't NASA. Yeah, you got me. But it was Pacific Rim, sideways Pacific Rim. But that's basically the vibe they had. They were like, we are going to cancel an apocalypse. It's very, very cool. I mean, NASA know how to market stuff. So how are they going to do that? So there's asteroids everywhere. Which one do you pick to deflect? What are you going to do? Well, to deflect it, you have to fly a spacecraft into it. That's the easy bit. But what asteroid are you going to pick? Turns out you need to pick 2 asteroids. You have an asteroid that's like the Earth and a small one like the Moon. And that asteroid goes around the planet kind of asteroid. And if you deflect that small one, you can change its orbit around the big one without knocking it flying off course. You do not want to just shove an asteroid in a random direction. I don't want to annoy space. Space has a way of annoying us back. So what they were going to do is build a spacecraft called DART, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, and they were going to slam this spacecraft into that asteroid and shrink its orbit around Didymos, the bigger asteroid. So Dimorphos is not a threat. It's the city killer-sized asteroid. It's not heading towards Earth, but it's a perfect way of testing, could we deflect it in an emergency? So they thought, sure, we'll give it a go. Now, how hard is that doing? Now, I had the quote here because it's just so ridiculous. No one has ever tried to deflect an asteroid before. And the person in charge of basically flying the spacecraft said, imagine you're at JFK Airport and you know where the Dallas Airport is, and you have a dart. The dart is only 2.5 millimeters at the tip. It's tiny. And you take that dart from JFK and you throw it to Dallas, and you hit the center of a bullseye on the actual dartboard, except you don't know where the dartboard is within the Dallas Airport. So that's how hard it is to do it. No biggie, no biggie. Very, very difficult. But they thought they'd give it a go. So on November the 24th, 2021, this spacecraft called DART, about the size of a car, was launched on a rocket into space, and then we had to wait 10 months to see what would happen. And, you know, it was just cruising on its way. It had to get to its target. Would it work? Could they pilot this spacecraft into this asteroid? Did it have a smart enough brain? We'd have to find out. In the meantime, I thought, seems like a pretty good self-help book to write. How to kill an asteroid. I just want to put that, so it's like how to make friends, how to handle relationships, how to kill an asteroid. It's self-help for the planet. On board the spacecraft, by the way, that thing on the right, the space-age toaster, is a little thing called LichAcube. And it's basically a little onboard camera that would eject itself from the spacecraft as DART would fly into the asteroid. Now, DART's mission was to die. If it kept living, they'd messed up. That had to kamikaze itself into the asteroid. But LichAcube would survive, and it would go by and, like paparazzi, just take pictures of the impact. So they hoped that would work. They didn't know if it would work or not. The people working on the mission were also just the best kind of nerds. Not only did they get into the science because they were like the kind of kids that put fireworks in abandoned cars, and NASA said, use your powers for good, not evil, or they went to the premiere of Star Wars as kids, or this person, Lena Adams, she's like the human co-pilot of the mission. That thing she's pointing to there, that's their mascot for the mission, Darth Vader. 2 of the instruments are called Luke and Leia on the thing. So the mission had a very Star Wars vibe, very, very Star Wars vibe. Now, in the meantime, as this is cruising towards its target, there are other aspects to planetary defense than just punching an asteroid in the face very hard. Step 1, you have to get to know what asteroids are. You can't just punch an asteroid as hard as you can. Or a comet, incidentally. And we have sent missions to comets and asteroids before, like these. These are 2 comets, iconic images. Now, the one on the left, Comet Tempel 1, NASA wanted to know what was inside a comet. What's it made of, apart from ice? What's it made of? And they thought the best way to do it, being Americans and all, was to shoot it. It turns out that was a really good idea, but no wonder space is mad at us. So they sent a copper missile into this comet and blasted it apart, and got this iconic image, I think. And it was kind of like a precursor to DART. They were like shooting at something moving in space, so it was a good effort. The one on the right, Comet 67P, it's kind of a weird duck-shaped comet, but the European Space Agency wanted to like land something on there, and they did, and it was amazing. But they kept finding something weird about comets, and that they were like not as solid as they thought. And the same is true of asteroids. Now, the one on the left, that's Ryugu. The Japanese Space Agency sent a mission there, stole some matter from these asteroids, returned it back home, see what it's made of. You know, if you want to deflect or destroy an asteroid, you have to see what it's made of. You can't just hit it as hard as you can. And the one on the right, Bennu, is the one that NASA recently stole some material from. So we've shot at comets a lot, we've poked them, and we've stolen asteroid stuff. No wonder space is trying to kill us. Now, this is a really random looking image, but the reason I'm showing a cappuccino foam is because that is the density of an asteroid and a comet. It isn't solid rock at all. It's so many tiny particles of solid rock that it has the density of cappuccino foam. Now, I don't know if you've tried to punch cappuccino foam. I haven't, for sure. But it would just go everywhere. Now, that's a problem. If you want to try and destroy an asteroid, you don't want to hit it so hard it does this. You do not want to do that. Instead of having a cannonball coming towards Earth, you've created basically a shotgun spray. Now, it will do less damage individually, but you don't want all of that coming towards the planet. And if it's big enough, it reforms itself like a liquid Terminator. Space is crazy. You cannot hit asteroids that hard. You have to give them a gentle slap, I suppose. Now, even, going to asteroids and comets in space is a good way to see what they're made of, but sometimes you need their traitors, you need meteorites that come to us, and they always land in inconvenient places. They don't just go poof and land in a scientist's laboratory. That'd be great. My favorite story of trying to find a meteorite is one exploded over the skies of Botswana in 2018, and it landed in the Kalahari Central Game Reserve, which is basically the size of the Netherlands, and that place is filled with lions and tigers and leopards and lots of animals that would kind of want to eat you. So when they went looking for these fragments of an asteroid, meteorites, they had to bring an armed guard in, and apparently the sort of leopards were just chilling on a tree, just sort of drooling as they were just going down, trying to find, is that a meteorite? Now, you might think it's really easy to find a meteorite. There is a problem with meteorites. It's very childish, but it's very true, in that on grass, a meteorite looks a lot like poop. It looks a lot like poop. And 40 times in a row, they went, there it is. There's the meteorite. Oh my God, it's something valuable from outer space. And it's poo. Oh no. And they did this over and over again. Imagine giraffes looking at you going, as you're trying to pick up something from space, and it's just poop. It's very embarrassing. But this happens every time they're trying to look for meteorites. Eventually, they found it. It was great. And again, they found out that meteorites are not, again, these hyper-solid things, but made of very crumbly rock. So as DART was kind of launching to its target, they put some of these meteorites in this giant, weird-looking cannon thing, which, is something that I think more people should know about. NASA has a giant cannon. They fire bullets at asteroids. That's just the sort of thing you want to tell kids, to be like, why should you get into science? Because you could have a giant cannon that fires at meteorites. Anyway, they kept firing bullets at these meteorites, and they blasted apart so fluidly, and they kept thinking, oh no, this stuff is so weak, it could completely shatter apart. We'd never done this before. We never really knew what would have happened, unless you try. But they were still going to try. Step 2 is you have to find them before they find us, as the person in charge of NASA's Planetary Defense Office often says. You cannot deflect an asteroid if you can't see it. And here's the thing, right? Asteroids zip by and hit Earth all the time. They're often very, very small, so they don't make a bit of a fuss. And I'm sure the tabloid media don't do anything crazy about these asteroids, except they do because they always compare them to animals for some reason. An asteroid half the size of a giraffe strikes Earth. Is it height or width? It's probably height, isn't it? But who sat there thinking, what can we compare this to? People cannot possibly understand 4 meters. That's a crazy concept. Half a giraffe. That'll do it. That'll work. Although my favorite one is this. 2 asteroids the size of 100 pugs to pass Earth Tuesday. And they've said NASA as if NASA said that. NASA did not say that. That is not what NASA said. I even love in the sort of bit underneath, it said, don't worry, it won't hit us. Pugs are more likely to hit us. Yeah, that's true. And then the article is just this. As stated earlier, both asteroids have a diameter that at most measure to around 100 pugs in width. Assuming those pugs were stacked on top of each other, paws to shoulders, forming some sort of adorable wheezing leaning tower of pugness. Journalism, eh? And yeah, they even compared it to the fastest pug in history. They said, surprisingly, that the asteroid is traveling just so much faster than a pug ever could. News you can use, right? Amazing. One of the fastest pugs in history. Oh, good for it. Now, trying to find these asteroids is quite tricky, partly because there are so many satellites in the sky. So all those lines going across this thing, they're Starlink satellites. Because we really need the internet, there may be a chance that astronomers miss a killer asteroid heading towards us, because increasingly images will look like that if you have a ground-based telescope. So NASA, not willing to risk it, is basically sending a sniper into space. It's called NEO Surveyor, Near Earth Object Surveyor, and it's got an infrared scope. And the great thing about that is it can look anywhere in space, it can look in the glare of the sun, it can look anywhere. And unlike optical astronomy, if light reflects off of a small reflective asteroid, it looks the same as a big, dull asteroid. So you don't know the size of the asteroid, and it's harder to see. Infrared, if it glows big, it's big. If it glows small, it's small. Very convenient. That's launching in a few years. That is designed to find all of the city killer asteroids that we haven't yet found, and it probably will. So that's amazing that they're doing that. Now, step 3, nuking time. In an emergency, you would use nuclear weapons. And Something about Armageddon is that, yes, it's crazy. Someone literally rides a nuclear bomb like a horse at one point. Someone gets space dementia. Amazing. But using a nuclear weapon is a viable source of planetary defense. It's kind of ironic that a weapon of mass destruction could be used for mass salvation. But you would use it if an asteroid was too big and you couldn't hit it hard enough, or you wanted to just completely vaporize it. You could just use a nuclear weapon, but you would not drill into it. You would not land asteroids and drill into it. That is mental. Why would you do that? Apart from the drama, of course. Do not drill into an asteroid. A, they don't like it. It's like a dentist for an asteroid. No one loves it. And B, if you put a nuke in an asteroid, it will not cleanly split in two. It will be radioactive, and it will still hit the planet. So not only are you having asteroids hit the planet and making a big crater, it's radioactive. It would be terrible. You would not do this. As usual, you need to determine, are you going to deflect it or disrupt it, break it apart? If it's really, really big, set off a nuke next to it. It will irradiate the surface. The surface will crack, blast off into space, and act like a rocket that will push that asteroid away. Good job. And that will work fairly well. If you want to completely destroy it, you need a really big nuclear weapon. So that's more a Hail Mary approach. But again, don't mess it up. You do not want to turn a cannonball into a radioactive shotgun. Not good. Now, in an emergency, you would use nukes. But if you had enough time, if you had a decade or so, you knew where this asteroid was, it was city killer size, the best thing to do is punch it in the face. That's what you should do. And that's basically what DART was trying to do. That's the main, it was our go-to way of saving the world. So on September the 26th, 2022, DART was due to die. It was closing in on the asteroid. And now it has a really clever brain. It basically has like a ballistic missile technology brain. And it had to target this tiny asteroid as it emerged from behind the bigger one. It's never done this before. Humanity has never done this before. There was every chance it could miss. It may not work. Fortunately, I snuck into mission control to watch it happen. On the day, telescopes from all over the world were trained on it. Telescopes in space were trained on it. Hubble, James Webb Space, every telescope in the world was brilliantly under the control of this one scientist who felt like a supervillain for the day, just commanding the world's telescopes. Amazing. But crucially, on DART, there was a camera called Draco. And because it wasn't that far away, we got to watch in real time this tiny spacecraft try and hit this asteroid. So you could watch like it was a sporting event. And here's the last 20 seconds of what it saw. Well, that asteroid, that bigger one, that's Didymos, that's the one you don't want to hit. Dimorphos is that small speck there, and people were counting down. People got very tense. I saw someone crush a hot cup of coffee into their hands. I was like, God, oh no, because people were frightened it would miss. But as it got closer and closer, people kind of fell into a hushed silence. It became a world unto its own, this big silvery orb. But it still could miss. No one was really sure. And then at the last second, that's all it saw. And then the signal cut out, which was a bit sketchy. That's the last thing it saw. And it could still have missed. They needed to get a loss of signal. They needed to know the spacecraft died, but that signal hadn't come. So it felt like it might have missed. And immediately I thought back to this. When I was a kid, I saw a comic called Hal Bop in the skies above England. And I remember being a nerdy kid thinking, space is always something that affects us. It's something that we can visit, we can study, we can understand, but we're never going to affect it. We're never going to change it to make, the universe different. It's something that's always going to affect us. Changing that, actually affecting space, I thought, would be something akin to magic, really. But fortunately, on that day, magic did happen. That explosion there is the spacecraft hitting that asteroid dead on. A telescope in South Africa saw it. People suddenly got the loss of signal in the control room, and people went mad. I've never seen scientists swearing so much out of joy. People were crying. I saw people giving me piggybacks. Someone fist bumped me, gave me a massive hug. I didn't know who they were. They hit it. Not only did they hit it dead on center. This tiny, tiny spacecraft in a world's first planetary defense experiment was a complete success. They hit it. And this is another image they captured on the day. Now see that long tail coming out from the back? We hit that asteroid so hard that it sent so much debris behind it that it turned it into a comet. We turned an asteroid into a comet. That's sci-fi like levels of stuff, which is why that image I showed you earlier was a bit of a lie. It's not a comet. That's the asteroid that we hit. That big trail of debris coming off the back is all the debris that shattered away from the asteroid. It was glittering in the darkness. It was incredible to see, and they deflected it so much that the orbit shrank to almost nothing. So it actually proved that for once, we can save the world. We can actually deflect an asteroid. We can do it. And that image here was taken by a LiCube. You know that little toaster they took along for the ride? That spider-like debris going around it shows that they hit it dead on. The debris went all the way around it, and it deflected it and caused a bright flash that you could almost see from Earth. And that's another image there of the kind of comet-like tail. So everyone at NASA was very happy. The world was very happy. We could save the world. And someone mentioned it, someone phrased it in a way that I thought was really beautiful. They said, we've rearranged the cosmos to make it more habitable. You know, and I just want to reiterate, like, you cannot stop an earthquake from killing people. You can mitigate its damage. You can't stop a volcanic eruption from killing people. You can kind of just reduce the casualties. You can't stop a hurricane barreling to people. You can't stop a pandemic. You can just do things to resist, to push against it. But these scientists demonstrated that you can literally save the world. You can move space around to make it more habitable. And they did it simply because they can, just because they thought it would be cool. Now, obviously, I wrote a book about it, How to Kill an Asteroid. It's very, very fun. But my favorite thing about it was just that it's actually a feel-good story. You would think that the end of the world would be a pretty grim story, but it turns out we can stop it. And I just think in a world that's very frightening and terrifying, really, a feel-good story about scientists saving the world is something that we all could need. And on that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I'd love to hear your questions about killing asteroids. Thank you very much.
Jesus. All right. Make yourself comfortable. Thank you very much, Robin. As always, it was a fascinating journey. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes. We are all remembering the pugs now.
Yep,
And
the pugs you
there
can't
are actual
think.
questions about the pugs here.
Oh, yeah.
So we, but first, I want to start with a different question. You met those people, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
we saw you in a photo, though. So tell us about them. I mean, what kinds of people work there?
Mad.
How many are there?
Mad people. You know,
They're literally mad scientists.
it's like, you know, it's like the Ocean's 11 of saving the world. They like basically went around recruiting the most hyper-energetic, childlike scientists. When I made that joke, well, it was like, oh, well, someone put fireworks in their car, and NASA was like, do you want to use those powers for good? That's literally what happened. As a kid, they put fireworks in abandoned cars, and someone at NASA was like, stop, come with me, like a sort of NASA Gandalf or something. It was amazing. The person who used to be in charge of planetary defense was a Star Trek fan who saw an episode of Star Trek where they deflected an asteroid, and he was like, yep, that's what I want to do. The person in charge now, she went to see the premiere of Star Wars as a kid, grew up in Hollywood. So they're just the most like pop culture heavy people ever. You know, at one point when Dart hit the asteroid, someone went, "This is for the dinosaurs," which is amazing. So just lovely, like absolutely lovely, yeah.
How many people are there?
I think they had about 400 people total working on the mission.
400 people?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But there's a core crew of them. You know, there's like the co-pilot of it, the lead engineer, you know, someone who like tried to work out, like the observations, like Monarch, who tried to work out, like, did they hit it? How badly did they hit it?
Right.
We didn't accidentally break it apart, did we? Type thing. So, yeah,
Right.
there's a bunch of people, yeah.
Okay, so we all heard now of the US Space Force.
Yeah.
Do they have anything to do with planetary defense in this sense, or they have a wholly different purpose?
They have so the Space Force's like thing is anything in geostationary orbit. So the furthest satellites away, that's the sort of stuff they deal with. And I think eventually, almost inevitably, they'll probably have some impact on like the moon and things like that. But an asteroid is just so far out until it suddenly is not. So they really have they'd have nothing to do with it. You know, they do have some monitoring capabilities that I tried to ask about, but I was told I'm just not allowed to see what they are for some random reason. So, but otherwise, no, it's NASA, the European Space Agency, yeah.
Right. Are you familiar with other countries having similar project?
Yeah, so Japan almost
Like,
did
because
it.
we don't want to have it as in the movies, like the US saves the world.
No,
while
although
everybody else is just
ironically
like-
that is true at the moment.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
would do
yeah.
it. Japan almost beat them to it, actually. They wanted to design a really similar planetary defense mission, but because the concept of defense is very constitutionally sketchy in Japan, their post-war constitution, that even though it's planetary defense, the government said you can't do this. Just because it had the word defense in it, which is really disappointing, because they would have been really good at it. But China is now going to also run a spacecraft into an asteroid by 2030, and it's really small, and they're probably going to blow it up, and it's going to send it flying in all directions. And everyone's like, why would you do that? And they basically said, and I'm quoting someone here, YOLO. So, okay.
All right. So a question here: are large planets more likely to attract asteroids? They are.
Yeah,
definitely.
but they-
I mean, this is the ultimate defense that we actually have, right?
Oh,
I mean,
no.
Jupiter is like dragging them all in, or
Oh no, Jupiter's a bully, basically. Jupiter's the reason that, like, sometimes it sucks comets and asteroids in, but actually a lot of the time it pulls them out of orbits and sends them chaotically moving around the sun, and they're some of the ones that have hit Earth. So actually, Jupiter is thumbs down in my book. I think, yeah, don't trust it.
right? Okay. A question: how did they control the rocket to hit the asteroid? Now, you made an analogy on how difficult this whole exercise is. So, can you just briefly explain how it works from like pure like mechanical trajectory?
So it had like, you know when Luke's doing the trench run in Star Wars, and he's got the targeting computer,
Right.
This is, basically they had something like that. It even looked like that on the screen. The spacecraft had a targeting brain. Its one job is to like hit the target. So it's kind of like missile technology, but the problem they were worried about is that that target is very small and moving very fast, like 14,000 miles an hour, and they were worried that it couldn't track the smaller asteroid. They were worried that it would hit the big one, because it's just an obvious target, me kill asteroid, that's the one. But so they didn't know until the last minute that it was going to hit, because it had to not only lock onto the smaller one about 20 minutes earlier, but then had to avoid the big one. So it had a smart brain, but it was still like, it might not go, it might not hit it, it might miss. And when I was like, if it misses, what happens? Like, we go around for another go. It takes 2 years to do that. And like, well, when's the target date? And they was like, Halloween 2025, 2024 actually.
2024, right.
Because they like to hit the spooky dates, I guess.
Right, of course. And it was a pure kinetic force, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just hit it. It didn't have anything inside, right? Like no explosive, no additional
No
weights,
explosive.
not anything. And is there, like, in the concept of planetary defense, you already spoke about nuclear weapons. Are there any other ways that are being considered in order to deflect the more dodgy ones, the bigger ones, for example? And how big is the asteroid that we can actually do something about? And
That's an awkward question.
Yeah.
Because
above
a certain size, at the moment there isn't really anything we could do because it's just too big. But it would have to be hilariously big. It's mostly if an asteroid is like 1 kilometer or bigger and you don't have more than 10 years, you'd have to use a nuclear weapon. It's the only thing that would work. But some of the other ideas, and this is going to sound ridiculous, is paint it. You'd paint the asteroid, you'd tag it like some graffiti. Because if you paint one side white, it reflects more starlight, and that would very gradually nudge it off course. But that would take like decades. Or you could build a giant spacecraft to park nearby, and then drag it with the spacecraft's own gravity out of place. But the worry there is if you do it not enough, you condemn a random country to death rather than the one it's supposed to hit. And I don't think people will be like, nah, it's cool, we'll go with that. It would delight no one.
Paint it.
Yeah, spray paint.
With a reflective paint.
Yeah, just get Banksy.
That's pretty interesting. Now, you did say that it might hit the wrong target. How precise are we in knowing where an asteroid might hit?
The more observations you have, the more precise you know its orbit around the solar system. But because if you want to know exactly where it's going to hit, and I think this is the bit that really freaked me out, actually. Well, the rest of it's very optimistic. This bit I was like, is that you need to hit it with radar, which means the asteroid has to come really close to know exactly where it's going to hit. And when they've practiced this, they war game this out. It's normally 6 days before impact that you know where it's going to hit. So before then, it's like a big swath of the world could be affected. And then they're like, oh, it's Sophia, actually. Can
Right.
you imagine?
Can you imagine?
Yeah, that's crazy. But like, that's
I don't think
currently-
we'll be surprised. It's like, of course.
Yeah,
it's Sophia.
of course. But that's why you need to find them quickly. You know, that's their main focus right now.
And how about, this, like, the stochastic nature of this whole, because what is the analogy? It's like playing pool, right?
Yeah.
And you hit something and then you deflect it to go to a different trajectory. Can
Yeah.
we plan the trajectory that that the asteroid
To
can
some
go?
degree.
Or it's...
It's to some degree, but in an emergency, I think most people would be worried about, like, let's just knock it out of the way. Yeah. Although, weirdly, even DART had some random stuff, because they hit it hard enough that so much debris came off, that some boulders are going off in, like, all directions, and none of them are heading our way, then they'll be too small. But they calculated that in about 7,000 years, a big boulder is going to slam into Mars. So can you imagine, like, some astronauts on there 7,000 years in the future being killed by a boulder from the Earth's first planetary defense test? That would suck. Be kind of funny, though.
Now, you did say that an asteroid pretty much resembles the foam of a cappuccino. Is that universal? Is that true for all asteroids?
For the city killer ones, that seems to be true, no matter what they're made of, unless it's all iron.
And for the others, we don't essentially care, so we don't have to adjust the way that we approach the problem.
If they're above a certain size, you're probably always going to deflect it, and you probably are going to just, use the biggest kind of deflection punch you've got. But they're less likely to shatter into loads of pieces. But you really don't want to hit it hard enough to accidentally do it. Even DART, after they observed all that debris, they actually, for 24 hours, went a bit quiet, and it's because they were worried they had actually broken it into pieces.
Right.
But they were fine. But they were not fine for about 24 hours.
Okay, you get a compliment for your T-shirt just now.
Oh yeah,
it's a nice T-shirt. Do we have an estimation of how many asteroids we don't see right now, or we know them all? Have we mapped the sky?
So, of the planet killer ones, there's about 50 we don't know where they are in near Earth orbit. Near Earth orbit means it's about a third further away from Earth than the Sun. But they're mostly going to be found pretty quick. The city killer ones, they think there's 25,000 near-Earth asteroids, and they've found under half of those, which is a bit eek. So there's, 14,000 still somewhere out there that they're going to find very quickly with that NEO surveyor. Of the ones that blew up that forest in Russia, something called the Tunguska impactor, there's millions of them, and we know where 7% of those are. So
there are millions of the Tunguska type of meteorite.
Millions, yeah.
And that was a massive impact.
It was.
Was it like in 1920s or
1908?
1908,
yeah. 12 megaton nuclear blast around them. But that's why they are launching that NEO surveyor satellite, because it will find pretty much. Well, those are a bit harder, but it will find most of the ones of that size, sort of thing. Chelyabinsk, there's hundreds of millions of them, and they're really small. So we just have to cross our fingers with those.
Oh,
Sorry.
Wow. Okay. An XKCD what-if type of question we have here. So would a 200-meter pug traveling with the speed of 17 kilometers per second reach the surface or break up and burn up in the atmosphere?
It would make a really great squealing noise as it did, wouldn't it? I think the atmosphere would get it. I think the atmosphere would get it.
So if we make an analogy here with a real asteroid, a 200-meter asteroid will burn in the atmosphere?
Oh, if it's a pug, it might a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of feel sorry for the pug now, but if it's a giraffe, maybe even better. I think that would break apart much more easily.
Right.
But imagine the insult of being hit by a massive, like a football stadium-sized pug.
Does anybody know what a pug is? Because we've been talking about pugs. I mean, put a picture of a pug at some point. It's like these small mops. Yeah, that's how we call them.
You hear them coming before you see them.
Right. Don't do that. Don't start. Okay. Are you familiar with the rods of God planetary weapon concept? Have you heard of that?
I'm uncomfortable with the name, but...
What are we saying? There we go.
There you go, yeah. Imagine being wiped out by that. You bet, oh, how adorable. Death. The rods of God. Yes, I see the resemblance. That's why I keep my glasses on, just in case.
Right.
But the rods of God, that's mainly... I think that was named after a weapon, basically. That's a concept that came up in the Cold War, that if you basically do dart to Earth, you send a projectile into Earth, without the explosive, you just drop it from space. It would cause a massive crater and it would suck. But someone's thought, well, what if we do that to asteroids? And they basically would put spikes on the end, go in front of the asteroid, just put spikes like a big roadblock, and it would cheese grate the asteroid into pieces.
Right.
And that's a cool concept, but you still need a fair amount of warning to basically get ahead of the asteroid and set that up. So it's still it's not the top, it's not plan A. It's pretty cool.
A.
Yeah.
All right. Any other weird concepts that the scientists at the NASA Planetary Defense Unit are considering?
I mean, not that they're considering. I think they want to do the gravity tractor things, pull it out the way, or they might try and paint something, or they might do dart on a bigger asteroid. But people say things like, nanomachines that could just eat up the asteroid, and you're like, cool, sure, okay,
right.
Whatever. There's the idea they keep thinking about, and that private industry keep thinking about, is what if you capture the asteroid? And every now and then, I don't know if anyone saw it in the news, but back in September, Earth briefly had a second tiny moon, and it was just an asteroid that did a loop of the Earth just to say hi or flip us off.
Did a bunch of people try to grab it?
Yeah, and people were like, if you would, that's the sort of asteroid you'd try and grab and then put in a stable orbit and then mine. I'm sure nothing will go wrong with that at all. Absolutely nothing.
Right. So how plausible is the concept of mining, considering the current technology that we have?
No, the current technology we have, it's not. I mean, the main problem would honestly be these asteroids are just so flimsy. You wouldn't imagine if you accidentally break it apart. It would just, that would be. So it's mainly a safety thing. But you could mine it. There was a private company that's picked an asteroid that they're going to send their own little spacecraft to. A metal asteroid, just to prove you can just quickly go there with private funding and then take some of the material and bring it back. So I think asteroid mining is super feasible, but not just yet.
Yeah.
But the way we're going with
it's not economically feasible.
Yeah, I mean,
I would imagine, but at this point.
Yeah. But weirdly, the thing on asteroids that people would want to mine most isn't what you probably think. It's not metals and things, even though that'd be really valuable. It's actually water, and not to drink it. It's to make rocket fuel. So that's the main thing they'd go for. If you want to travel through space really effectively.
Just jump on asteroid, fuel.
Yeah, you turn the water into fuel basically. In the South Pole as well. That's mainly why they'd use the water, is that they'd turn it into rocket fuel and for energy and things like that. And to drink, make moon cocktails.
Sounds absurd.
It does.
But let's see. Okay, do you think a large solar sail anchored to an asteroid can do something about?
Maybe, but they've moved so fast though. NASA and Japan and the European Space Agency have managed to land on asteroids and stuff like that. So a solar sail could work, but asteroids often spin. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. So they don't just stay in one spot. They spin really fast, which is really irritating, because if you want to deploy a sail on a boat, if your boat is just spinning like that, you're just not going anywhere. So I think solar sail is more for actual going into space with, scientific equipment. So they might use it to get to an asteroid, but probably not to sail it. But I love the idea of someone sailing an asteroid into the moon or something.
Riding it.
Yeah.
Like polar treaties.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of catastrophic scenarios that we can actually observe, because if something is hitting Earth, potentially we will be able to see it, but it will be much more spectacular if you see something giant hitting the moon.
Oh, yeah.
How does this scenario unfold for us?
How would we...
What will happen to us?
It would be bad. If something smashed into the moon, most of that debris would fall on it and us. Mm-hmm. So you don't really want things to hit the moon so much, but... The moon's had really good views. Imagine being on the moon and seeing something hit the Earth.
Oh my God, yeah.
And, if you were on the moon 66 million years ago and you saw the big dinosaur coming impact, there's this beautiful passage in a book where scientists is pretty convincingly arguing there's probably dinosaur dust on the moon, because the impact was so gigantic and it carved a giant hole out the Earth and sent material into space. Some of that would have landed on the moon. So there's probably dinosaur bits on the moon, which I think is kind of incredible. Is
NASA working on giant robots like the Pacific Rim? You didn't get a top clearance for top secret things.
No, but,
obviously.
Yeah.
How do they treat journalists in NASA?
Quite well. Yeah, really well. They're very cozy and stuff. The only thing that bugged me is that when were invited to see the DART impact. Often with these events, they put journalists in like a little like clean room where you have like some coffee and then you just have some screens. Me and a friend snuck across campus to get into the mission control room because we were not happy with that, and it was a really good decision. But the main reason we did that was because there was no coffee there either. So, like, what? And we went to the campus, and they were having a party, there was a barbecue, there were cocktails there. Oh, it was so much better. And I tripped over Bill Nye on the way.
Bill Nye?
He got out of the taxi to go in, and I tripped over him as we went past.
What a privilege, you know?
Yeah, his privilege, obviously. Yeah. I'll get him back.
All right, some people want to ask questions about volcanoes. Obviously, you've given a talk about space volcanoes on this very stage a couple of years ago. It was also like fascinating. And I'm going to repeat a question that for some reason keeps occurring in people's minds because we are catastrophists, obviously.
Yeah.
And the scenario in which there is like a huge underground volcano under Yellowstone, that thought keeps torturing people, and we think that it's inevitable that something will explode there and just kill us all. So as a volcanologist, talk about that.
Yeah, we're all going to die. No, I'm joking, but it's fine.
Eventually.
The plan is to get an asteroid and go thunk and just get it in the crater so it blocks it up. Imagine that noise, just be great. No, but in all seriousness, the Yellowstone is nothing to worry about. I mean, it's not like zero worry, but generally when a volcano, so a supervolcano is just a volcano that's erupted once, very catastrophically at some point in its lifetime. If it never does it again, it's still called a supervolcano. So it's like an Olympic athlete, basically. So, and like Olympic athletes, they can often retire. So often the first few are like catastrophic.
But like presidents, they can come back, right? With a bang.
My goodness.
You know, and
that
kill us all. Okay, so Yellowstone, we don't worry about
Yellowstone, if it was going to... Yellowstone has small eruptions quite frequently, but you still see those coming. If it was like a mega eruption, like 11,000 people live and work around the park, it would put on a show. You'd know something is coming. Like the ground would literally swell up a bit.
But there will be nothing we can do about it, right? And we're just going to observe.
You move out the way as much as you can, yeah. Basically, yeah. But you cannot stop it.
How far away you should go in order to avoid the effects of a supervolcano?
Well, if it's Yellowstone, I mean, Sophia would be pretty good, actually. You're pretty far away at that point.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So what are
the ash landing everywhere would be a problem for everyone, but it would mainly be a problem for... There'd be like a financial crash, no biggie. You know, North America would be under 3 meters of ash. Whatever. But Sophia would be, broadly speaking, okay.
Okay, so what is the volcano that we should be worried about then?
The ones that they're the ones that like Mount St. Helens type thing.
The what?
Mount St. Helens, the one in 1980 that basically blew up again with the fall. It erupted with someone made this calculation. When Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, it was more explosive than every explosive ever detonated in human history at that one point. So every nuke at that point, which was just 2, and every weapon in World War I and II, that eruption was more powerful than all of that combined because it blew up the mountain.
Yeah, but that is considering the energy.
Yeah.
That is, but it didn't have like the same effect because I would imagine a nuclear winter and like
no, it erupted because it erupted sideways. And this thing, it's not that
sideways.
It erupted sideways, and it killed
from the side, like
yeah. Like
Jesus.
There's actually a really sinister there's a volcanologist was on the nearby that day, and he narrates his last moments seeing it come at him because he just thought I can't get out of the way. So he just describes it happening as it happens. It's a really haunting thing, and the only reason it didn't kill more people is because they knew it was going to happen at some point, so they managed to get people out of the way. And it wasn't that close to a city. But those are the ones you should worry about, because ones like Mount Rainier, which is close to a city, will 100% erupt again, and it will be devastating. And you'll only have, how do you convince a city to evacuate? It's surprisingly difficult to do that if you're not 100% sure exactly when it's going to happen.
So we don't have a working system of warning people.
They do have it, but it's like you have, when it's really going to go off, you have minutes. But if it was really flaring up, they would probably choose to evacuate the area. They have like drills for it and things. But yeah, it's the volcanoes that are really nested in cities. Like Vesuvius, that will erupt again someday. It's a crazy thought. There's Pompeii nearby, now you've got Naples, a city of like millions, and one day it will happen to Naples. Hopefully they've just got a way to warn people out of the way. So That's the haunting about volcanoes. They're very amazing, and rarely do damage. When they do, you just have to get out of the way.
Right. And Vitosha is an extinguished volcano, right?
Yeah, I didn't notice until someone asked me about it. I was like, no, and looked it up and was like, oh crap, it is.
And there is no way something is happening with
No, that one's dead.
An asteroid will hit us more probably than...
That one's dead. Like thousands of years ago, people murdered the volcano and we're all fine now.
Right.
They plugged it up.
Okay. So some more about volcanoes. I don't know why I went into this.
Explodey things. It's my thing.
Yes, it's pretty awesome. So what was it's a stupid question. Like I'm a 5-year-old, but what is your favorite volcano and why?
Oh, that's cute. Now, my favorite volcano is it's probably one called Sakurajima in Japan. Because before 1914, it was an island, and after it was a peninsula because it erupted and made a land bridge to the land, which is pretty cool. It just didn't want to be lonely anymore, I think. But it erupts so frequently that if you go there, there's a good chance that you'll see it erupt and shoot lava into the sky, and they have drills. The Japanese are the best prepared for things like volcanic eruptions. They have drills every year, regularly, everyone knows what to do. Every school kid has a hard hat and a helmet and an evacuation route. So it's just so cool. And it's a volcano you can appreciate, the fearsome nature of it, but the beauty of it as well from a distance. It just is spectacular. And in the spring, there's just cherry blossom everywhere. So
of course,
it's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. How about underwater volcanoes? Now, we do know that most of them are underwater.
Yeah.
So what is hiding underwater?
Yeah, apart from the Kraken, obviously. Yeah. I wasn't supposed to talk about that. But there are volcanoes. Yeah, Earth is a volcanic planet. Most of its volcanoes are underwater. There's millions of them. Mostly they don't do much to affect us. In fact, they're probably where life started on Earth. So we know for ages that those black smoke events, that's where you find all those weird critters around, this weird life. It feels like that's something we've always known, but the year they first discovered those was 1977, which is when Star Wars came out. So it's a relatively recent thing. But, they're basically harmless for the most part, except occasionally, if it's a really big volcano that's quite close to the surface and it erupts, it causes tsunamis and big, turning water into steam. And do you remember the eruption in Tonga in 2022?
Yes.
Yeah. It was lucky that basically 3 people died from a tsunami. But that was like Krakatoa 2, basically. It was just lucky it was really remote. But it was the atmospheric blast was so powerful, it sent some of the ocean into space, and it caused a light tsunami in the Mediterranean because it actually made the entire atmosphere of the planet ring like a bell. So that's pretty cool.
Jeez, I mean, the very sentence, it sent part of the ocean into space.
Yeah, can you imagine that fish?
Absolutely absurd.
What a day. You think your day is bad.
Right.
Blasted into space. Who's going to water my plants? Anyway.
All right, okay. A couple of more questions about meteorites and we're done. Speaking with these scientists, are they actually considering the thought of, while they're working on deflecting meteorites, that they might or should or will at some point use the same technology to hit a spaceship? And I mean an alien one.
I honestly think the Department of Defense may be thinking about using that kind of thing, because it turns out throwing things into other things really fast is really good, really effective.
Right.
So maybe in an Independence Day scenario, we like throwing stuff on. In fact, one of the quotes that always sticks to me from a scientist is when I was asking him why he's working on the DART mission and do you think it's going to work? And he's like, yeah, well, we're all nervous, but if something's coming at us from space, we're apes. We know how to throw shit.
Yeah.
So that was his whole reasoning,
All right.
I can buy it.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Robin. It's always been a privilege having you here. Let's applaud Robin Andrews. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. Clicker.